Having a panic attack is never fun. And having a panic attack in the middle of the ocean while you're doing open water swimming is incredibly hard and challenging. But I had one and I learned 4 incredible life lessons. Tune in to hear more. So, I want to share a story about something that I actually did not want to do and just some context. This story is about swimming. And I didn't grow up swimming competitively. I wasn't on a swim team when I was growing up, but I loved the water. I've always loved the water. And over the decades, I've become a stronger swimmer. And I learned about something called SwimTrek when I was around 53 years old. This was about 3 years ago. So in 2023, a friend of mine texted me. This is around August, it's the end of the summer. And she says, I've just gotten back from this amazing experience. You have to do this. And this friend, her name is Ivy, she texted me these images of her swimming in beautiful parts of Greece. I thought, that's fabulous, Ivy. That's wonderful. She said, well, you've got to do this. It's open water swimming. And I texted her back and I said, I can't do that. Like, I need a swimming pool with lanes and black lines and a clear boundary. And she said, no, you absolutely can do this. And the reason why Ivy sent me this message in the first place is because we had done a work trip together 10 years earlier in Palo Alto in California, which is kind of inarguably the land of public swimming pools. And we shared an Airbnb together. And we learned during that experience that we both love to swim. We swam just about every morning before attending the conference that we were there for. So fast forward, August of 2023, and she says, you've got to do this thing called open water swimming. And the following summer, July of 2024, maybe it was 2022. And so the following summer of July 2023, I committed and I found myself in Crete, Greece, doing my very first open water swim holiday with a company called SwimTrek. And it changed my life. Now, it was not smooth sailing because actually on the very first day, I had a bit of a panic attack. You have to do something called an acclimation swim. And I just totally lost my bearings. I wasn't used to all these arms and legs around me. I lost my cadence of breathing. And while I can swim out of both sides of my face, I just got very flabbergasted and kept floating on my back. And we were supposed to swim 3 loops around 2 buoys. And after 2 loops around, I was just exhausted and feeling the voice inside my head was saying, you should have never come. You're the slowest person. You're going to drown, right? That was the negative Nancy is what I called that voice. And I raised my hand and I asked the guide, I said, I'm not doing well. Can I just get out the water? She said, absolutely, come out the water. And I'm standing on this pebble beach in this beautiful town of Lutro on the southern coastline of Crete and just feeling completely devastated and deflated. And while everyone else is finishing the swim, as I look down at my feet, I see this little heart-shaped pebble. I kid you not, this pebble was the shape of a heart. And I bent down and I picked it up and I just clutched it in my hand. I thought, maybe this is a good sign. Maybe this will turn around for me in some way. Well, that night I called my husband, John, and from the safety of our home, he was like, oh, you'll be fine. Keep going. And the next morning I'd gotten over myself and I said, okay, I'm the slowest person in the group. Whatever, it's fine. And let me just enjoy where I am. And that day I got out of my head and into my body. And I have to tell you, it was just the most glorious experience ever. And not only that, but that evening when the 2 guides were kind of letting us know how they thought we had done, and you always swim in groups, and it was kind of a slow, medium, fast group. I was in the slow group. They handed me the color swimming cap for the fast group. And I said, no, I'm slow. They said, no, you actually should be in the fast group. And what I learned from that very first experience is that when I got out of my head and into my body, when I stopped being so judgmental and self-conscious about every single thing and just allowed myself to experience, but also to get back into my technique, I actually became, and this sounds a little woo-woo, but I became one with the water. And the rest of the entire trip it was life-changing. And I returned home and I announced to John that I was going to gift myself one SwimTrek holiday every year. And I've since done that. So my first one was in Crete. My second one was in Nevis. And the third one was in Costa Rica. And this summer, I plan to do a swim trek on western coast of Mexico. Now, that was context. What I really want to share is how the life lessons just keep giving in open water swimming for me. And I want to share more specifically about the swim that I did in November of 2024. So this would have been my second swim trek off the island of Nevis in the Caribbean. Now, the way SwimTrek organizes their treks, they are organized by leisurely. Sign me up for leisure. I'm all about leisure at this stage in my life. Moderate. And then I don't know what comes after moderate because I'm not interested in doing anything beyond moderate. But it's 3K a day for leisurely, which is like 1.8 miles. And it's not like you have to swim 1.8 miles all at once. It's highly curated. For moderate level, it's 5K a day. And I thought, okay, I'll just swim at my own pace and, be chunked out. But the part about the Nevis swim that I saw from the safety of dry land when I was reading the description, yes, it was a moderate level swim. Yes, it'd be about 5K a day. But in fine print, it said on one of the days, we will swim a crossing. Now, in open water swimming, there's swims where you kind of hug the coastline, which is definitely my jam. And then there are swims where you go from one landmass to the next. And they're not huge a lot of the time. They're just, from a little tiny pebble island that's, adjacent to a coastline. Well, the fine print for the Nevis swim of November 2024 said on one of the days, we will swim from the island of Nevis to its sister island, the island of St. Kitts. And that's about 4K. And the description said, but if you want, you can swim it as a relay. I thought, perfect. There's no way that I can swim from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts in one swim. Just swim from island to island. No way. I will share it with someone. I will swim it as a relay. Well, I arrive in Nevis. It's an incredible time. People are wonderful as always. And the day comes, it was actually Thanksgiving Day in Nevis, where we were doing the crossing. Now, the crazy thing is, when that day came, I forgot that I had the option to swim it as a relay. And our wonderful guides neglected to remind us that we could swim it as a relay. So I stood on the coastline of Nevis, looking at the beautiful morning blue sky, looking at the peaks of mountains across the waterway that made up St. Kitts. And, when you're swimming open water, especially when you're doing a crossing, you have markings and sightings to help you keep course. And inside of me, I think I just decided to suspend judgment. So the first life lesson, going back to Crete, was to get out of our heads and into our body. The second life lesson was when I was on that coastline, forgot that I had the option to swim this as a relay, and I suspended all judgment. I thought, well, I know I can swim, and I know that I will always have the option to get back into the boat. So you swim in clusters with people, other people who are at about your pace, and there's always a boat that's shadowing you. And when we set out, everything was groovy, was pretty nice. And the cool thing about that particular swim is you can see the ocean floor the entire way. I mean, it's priceless. You can see sea turtles and fan coral and all sorts of fish. And you can see the sand. So it's not super scary, like there's just this depth of blue below you. So we're swimming along, and I start out the swim with fins. Some people call them flippers, but swimmers would call them fins to help with my flotation. But all of a sudden, I got the worst blister in my left big toe, and I had to get to the boat and remove the fins. I thought, okay, great. Now I'm really going to be slow on this swim because I don't have the fins to help me float. So it's just my body, just my arms, my legs, my swimsuit, swim cap, goggles, and earplugs. So I continue the swim, and then it starts to rain. And I mean, really, really rain. Like you can barely see visibility out the goggles. I'm trying to mark where people in my group are. There were 4 of us in our slower cluster. And it was just exacerbating because the rain was also brought with it some winds. And so the waves were getting a bit more tumultuous, but, still falling back into my technique and carrying on. But then all of a sudden I would see a beautiful sea turtle, and that would kind of calm me down. The next thing that happened was that because it was raining, well, it's the Caribbean, the sun came out like maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes later, and we saw beautiful, beautiful rainbow. So that was just spectacular, just be in the middle of the sea, this crossing between Nevis and St. Kitts, and then just be gifted with this incredible rainbow. So at this point, I have a blister on my big left toe. I've somehow gotten through the rainy part of the journey, and now I'm gifted with this rainbow. Now, around this time, I have no idea how far we are from St. Kitts. All I know is that we're not there yet, and the medium group is far ahead of us. The fast group is probably finished, but I'm hanging back and hanging tight with my swim buddy, Peggy. So again, I have no idea how much time, how many minutes have lapsed. Occasionally we're taking breaks, we're drinking electrolyte filled water because you're allowed to pause, you're allowed to take a break, a breather just to hydrate, and then you carry on. Well, at one point, I think I'm carrying on, but I'm looking down at the water and I realize that there's a boulder beneath me that hasn't moved, which means I'm not moving, which means I'm actually stuck in an eddy. And when I realize that while my arms and my legs are going, but this big rock is I'm just staring at a pretty little fish, flittering here and there. And I look up and I see Peggy all the way over there. I see the boat all the way over there. And I have a big freak out moment. And I panicked, as I did a year prior when I did my first swim in Crete. And I just said, help, help. And Peggy comes around. Now, what you have to understand about Peggy is that Peggy is a lovely English woman. And so everything that seems to come out of Peggy's mouth sounds lovely and calm. And I'm not feeling lovely and calm. I'm feeling like all over the place and panicky. And I don't have a great English accent. But Peggy says the equivalent of, shall we carry on? And I'm just like, no, we shouldn't carry on. How do I even get out of here? But the guide who was in the boat, they come closer to me. And here's what the cool thing is. It turns out that if you ever get stuck over a rock in the middle of the sea in an eddy, the way you get out of it is you have to go backwards and then around. And so that's what I did. I started to swim backwards and then I swam around the rock. And that, man, what a significant life lesson that is. How often have I been stuck on something, on a project, in a life moment? And when I reflect back on how I got out of those moments, sometimes to get out of stuckness, you got to go backward. I call that backcasting sometimes. Sometimes that's about asking for help. Sometimes it's retracing your steps. And then you have to go all the way around. Sometimes you have to take the long way in order to get back onto course. So, third life lesson. So, my teammate Peggy and the guide helped me to get out from that stuckness that was the eddy. And we carry on. And we're swimming and swimming, and we have to stay away from the rocky coastline because whenever you see foam and waves, while they look very pretty, crashing up against the coastline, it also means it's rocky. So we're balancing, like looking for our sighting, making sure we don't veer too far close to the rocks. And we hear our guide cry out to us, "Okay, ladies, you just have to go around that final headland, and then you'll just swim in to Reggae Beach." So we started at Wally Beach on the coast of Nevis, and we were going to be ending at what's called Reggae Beach. It's real popular, low-key, fun hangout spot. And Lord knows, I really wanted to be in a really low-key, fun hangout spot at that point. So I'm like, okay, we just have to get around this headland. So Peggy and I are swimming along, and I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling like, thank God I got out of that eddy where I was stuck. Thank God it's not raining right now. While my toe was still blistered, it wasn't bothering me because I had taken off the fins. And thank God I have Peggy to be my swim companion. And as I'm thinking these thoughts, all of a sudden we see 3 swimmers with orange swim caps heading towards us. Now, the slower group, we were wearing pink swim caps. The fast group, they had on orange swim caps. And we see 3 heads of orange swim caps bobbing towards us. So it was 3 people from the fast group who'd finished probably an hour earlier. They said, hey guys, we just came along to see you for the rest of the way. And they're just like doing a nice casual backstroke. And we're like, oh my God, thank you so much. And that moment was just an incredible reminder that our friends are everywhere. Just when you think, how am I going to make this to the end? Where is the end even? Our angels and our friends are everywhere. And so those three people, one of whom was Peggy's daughter, they saw us through to the rest of the way. And I got to tell you, when we rounded that headland and I could finally see the coastline of Reggae Beach, something just kicked in. And I just found every final ounce of breath and strength and just swam the rest of the way in. I'm getting a little choked up just thinking about it. But the point is, well, there's many points as you've heard, but here's what was really cool about seeing that headland getting closer and closer to Reggae Beach. Do you know what song was playing that we could hear the closer and closer we got to Reggae Beach? Bob Marley's One Love. I mean, how kismet is that to hear One Love, streaming out of the speakers as people are knocking back their cocktails, and we're just swimming, and the other guide is like there open armed to greet us. And then I had a nice rum and coke once I got out of the water and had a seat. And then what else happened after I was sitting there with my rum and coke is the skies opened with just a deluge of rain, just like crazy clouds rolling in full of gray, and all of this rain just pummeling down. So we just missed another rainstorm just as we got to the shoreline. So on my hardest days, I remind myself, girl, you swam from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts. You can do anything. And I wonder, what is the equivalent for you in your life? What is something that you had no intention of doing, that you tried anyway? You suspended judgment. You got through uncomfortableness. You got through being stuck. You were surprised by unexpected friends and allies and angels to help you finish the course. What is something that you have in your life that you can recall so that whatever you're going through, you can push forward and see your way through? Keep that in mind always.